All right, welcome to lesson 7. And this lesson we want to talk about other materials that are also can be reflective and starting to pick your materials for your big final two lesson rendering. So I thought it would be a good idea maybe to jump into Modo. So I'm in Modo here, made by Luxology, and I've set up a cylinder. First little section is a clear piece of glass, and it has a hollow here, and it sort of sticks onto that little post coming off the end. And the next one is carbon fiber. Then we have some burl wood. We have a matte finish, and then we have some polished shiny gold material. So by now, right, we're finished 6 lessons. We've covered glossy paint, chrome, metallic. We touched on water, and now we want to start to build out the rest of any materials that you're interested in rendering. So I'm going to cover these, and then what I'd like you guys to do this week, or this lesson, is to pick the materials that you think you want to put into your final rendering. So in the final rendering, it'd be nice to see, let's say, 5 materials like I have shown here. And it'd be nice if they're all reflected. So we're going to take this matte surface here, this light gray, almost white one, and make that semi-gloss. So one of the things that's interesting about Modo, and it's helped me to learn a lot more about materials and material indication as I render, we sort of have gone over everything you need to know on the Photoshop side, which is getting your base layer to have your patterns, your textures, whatever those are, and then all your reflections go on the clear coat. And this is kind of a nice example if we look at this rendering. We have that same environment that we started this course with, just 3 stripes on a white desert floor. And then you can see them reflecting up, and you see on the matte surface this black stripe does not continue, which is expected. There's our shadow reflecting in. All we get is nice reflected light and a good strong core shadow, which we don't see on the shiny chrome, or the gold, I should say. So, everything's expected. Per the physics, here's a stripe, this middle stripe continuing over the wood into the carbon fiber. I'm going to give you some renderings also this week of this cylinder. And then please find some good photo reference, as well as these images that I'm going to give you. So let's study the carbon fiber here. Take a minute for this to update, and with enough resolution so we can see the weave. So what's happening on the carbon fiber is it's basically a fabric weave, and as the weave interlaces with itself, it effectively, underneath the smooth clear coat and the smooth finish, it floats in resin or epoxy, and those bumps of the threads overlapping on each other actually start to reflect the light a little bit. And so if you want to do carbon fiber, what you need to do is basically warp a weave pattern. Well, maybe we'll try this in Photoshop. We're going to warp a weave pattern over our shape. Then we're going to go in and we'll have to find a way to pull out like a little color dodging of just some selected spots of the fabric. And that happens right where the light reflects on that shape. So it's much like a metallic, where you place that reflection of those little bumps, right? Or this little spectral effect of that is where the light is, our line of sight's bouncing back up towards the light. So it's just like a metallic surface. Then the rest of it's just a clear coat on top, like we've seen with the photographs I've already given you, like of that carbon fiber helmet shell. So if I was to move, let's see if it's probably a little slow because I'm trying to do this real time. But I'm trying to get the placement of the sun. There we go. That's the reflection of the sun through here. And now we see the weave even more. So now that I have a stronger reflection of the sun, we also need to then amp up the reflection of those little fibers, right? That weave underneath. Beyond that, you treat it exactly like glossy black. There's no core shadow. It's more like a black metallic, technically, and we get a little bit of that weave showing through. This next one is burl. So it's sort of a non-directional wood, right? And then it's like just a very strong texture to it. Let's see if I can move over here. Stage this one a little bit better for you. Give it a minute. Okay, so this one, if you wanted to render wood, you would do same sort of layering strategy that we've been doing inside Photoshop. All you have to do is change the base layer, add the texture of the wood, make sure that it wraps in perspective, do any matte surface shading that might need to be done, coarse shadows, etc., and then throw your clear coat on top. So what I really want you to see this week, or this lesson, is that the reflections don't change on top, but you can change the base material all you want. And each time you change that base material, you need to be considerate of the fact, oh, is it transparent? Is there a fabric weave? Does it have wood grain? Etc., etc. So let's take this matte gray one here, and let's see, that's cylinder 3, I believe. No, that's the wood 4, cylinder 4. Okay, if it was semi-gloss, I have a semi-gloss one here. Let's just turn this on, see what that looks like. So semi-gloss works a lot like metallic, all right, except for the fact that the reflection is blurry. So if this was a metallic finish, we would expect to get that kind of a reflection off the sun, but we would also expect this to be sharp if it had a clear coat over it. So all you really need to do a semi-gloss is amp up the reflection of the sun, okay, and then blur any reflections that are on your clear coat. Let's move that around so it's not so strong a reflection of the sun. There it is, much softer. But you see that the placement of our reflection of the sun comes in along the same line, right? It's a consistent cylindrical surface. And there's a tiny little radius as well. Right, each one of these has a little radius on the front and back edge. And so you just have to soften, but we still get the core shadow. So you see it's kind of a blend. If I turn back off the semi-gloss, note where the core shadow is. Okay, and now look at the brightest part of this one, because it's matte surface, is right up on the very, very top, because it's effectively top lighting. We don't get that reflection of the sun through here. It's not super bright right along this line. It's actually the brightest right up on very top, because that's a matte surface. So wherever your surface is perpendicular to the direction of the light, that's where you make it the brightest. And then wherever that passes tangent right through here, that's where you put your core shadow. And then anything beyond that is got to be reflected light coming from the environment. So here you see we have nice reflected light because it's a nice bright surface, and then here it's dark, not because it's a reflection, but because there's no reflected light coming out of that black shadow, or the black stripe, I'm sorry. So turn back on my semi-gloss and look at how the value mapping changes, right? When it was a matte surface, it was brightest right up on the very top. Well, what's happened now is that bright spots move down a little bit onto the side because it's reflective, right? Even though it's just semi-gloss, it's still reflective, but at the same time we still have the core shadow. So semi-gloss is kind of a blend between matte rendering, okay, and metallic in a way, because this is a reflective position of the sun, which we would expect to see more on a metallic surface. And then you can see, and right now that reflected light being brighter here and darker here is kind of doubling up with the reflection, so you're kind of getting an enhanced strength to that black stripe. Yet we still have the core shadow, but we have really no horizon through here. So it's really reflect the light, blur all the reflections on your clear coat, okay, keep some of the matte surface, and the way you do that is you just change the strength of your reflection. You just make it more transparent and let us see some of the matte surface down below. If we look at the gold over here, actually, you know what, before I go to the gold, let's take this matte surface and let's just use some of the terms that we've been talking about this entire course. And what's nice in Modo, and any 3D program mostly, is that they're labeled out with the same sort of same terminology we've been using, right? Here's my Fresnel. So let's say I wanted to make this glossy red. Well, I'm going to turn down the roughness a bit. I don't need to turn it down that much, but I want to go here and let's make it glossy red. Let's make it a little bit darker red. That looks pretty good. So that's if it was a matte red. Okay, now if I wanted to make it look more reflective, if I turn up the Fresnel, I know that it's going to start to reflect the environment wherever that surface rolls away from my line of sight. So I would expect to see more reflection here, more reflection across the top. So let's see what happens. Let's put this on 100. Okay, and if I hover my cursor over here, it will start to render faster in that area. So you can see the top, it's got a little bit of blue sky. Okay, and we've got a little bit of that ground and the shadow starting to come in. Now let's turn up the reflectivity a little bit. This is basically the reflection amount is basically sliding it towards chrome. So if I made that, let's see what happens if I make that 100. So there it's kind of a reddish chrome, but you can see all the reflections now are very, very sharp. So you can see where that everything's going to land. Now as I take it back down, okay, that's how you would start to play with the strength, and that's what we do with our layer masks inside Photoshop. And there's the stripe, there's the horizon, lighter sky, etc. Now if I wanted to make that metallic, I could turn up the specular amount. Let's turn that up to 55 and see what happens. And that, see, there's the reflection of the sun, and I might also shift the color to a slightly warmer red as the sun influences that. Okay, and so I might turn this down a bit. No, take that back up. There we go. So now I've got that reflective characteristic to the sun. So now it's reflecting the sun. So let's take this up. I'm going to position the sun right in there. Now I'm not getting the reflection of the sun on my clear coat, and that's a function of Modo, which is not very nice. So I have to basically make a fake sun. So let me just turn on my fake sun. There's now a reflection. It won't be at exactly in the right position, but it's pretty close. I have to trick Modo into getting that reflection of the sun on the clear coat. But we can see how it has been squashed, right, vertically. It's just a cylinder. So that's what we would expect to happen. It's floating right in the middle of that metallic area. Now what happens here, see, I just moved that around. Now my line of sight's no longer pointing back at the sun. If I wanted that to happen, I could add a radius to that. Right now the radius is too small. You know, it might show, if it rendered all the way to finished level, it might get a little bit like this one's showing there. Let's see what happens if I create a stronger radius by pulling the edges inward. So there it is, there's the sun. See that little white spot starting to show up there? That's my reflection of the sun, and you can see by adding this radius now across, I've just increased the size of the radius here and here. We start to get a little bit of blue sky coming in here on the backside, and we start to extend our spec, right, or the specular amount up that radius as well. So if I did that on any of those, we would get that happening. So let's take our gold one and let's add the radius to this one as well and see what happens. So I'm just deforming the surface a little bit to add a radius. And look at how the size of the sun and the position of it changes, right? Now it's strong on this radius, and it's seeing, of course, the backside of this red section of my cylinder. And there's another post, there's another cylinder in the middle here where they're all sitting. These are like rings now on this some dark gray post. So there's the reflection of the sun. If I undo that, back to the super tiny radius, okay, all that same information is in there. It's just squashed because it's a very, very tiny radius. And here we have the reflection of the sky. So we can see that mixing with the color of the gold. So if you put blue and yellow together, you get green. So if you have a shiny gold outside, it's really hard to predict this color without some photo reference, which is easy enough to do. But if you just do your layering strategy inside Photoshop and you have this yellow base, right, it's almost like tinting your, if it was just chrome, you could really put like a yellow color over the top and shift it towards yellow, and that would mix and shift our white to yellow, shift our blue sky to green, and then right where the Fresnel is very, very strong right at the edge, it goes all the way back to its environment color where it's the shiniest. So that's kind of nice to see, and that's how I would attack doing gold. Okay, so I've got right now light gray low gloss finished. It has a little bit of texture to it. As it renders out, that all goes away. So it's just like a really soft metallic in a way, without the grain to it. But we have strong cast shadows. We have a very strong core shadow, but we're also getting a reflection of the light. So this is that soft semi-gloss look. Now if we go here and look at another material, satin finished titanium, look at how much stronger the reflection of the light is there. We see a much stronger horizon, but you'll see that it's all soft. Okay, so if I keep letting this render to a higher level, you see how it's diffused. Look at the reflection of the stripe. Okay, all very soft. And look at how now our cut line is starting to pick up a couple little hot spots. Let's see if I can move that around to get a nicer reflection. Yeah, so they were picking up the reflection of the sun. Down in here, we might, no, that's going to be all in shadow, so I don't think we're going to get any in there. Yeah, we're getting a little bit off of that. See, it's sort of along that same line. And then here we're getting a little bit, but it's a really, really soft, fuzzy reflection. But the map is exactly the same, meaning where you put your horizon, your stripe, the sky, all of that. Let's have a look at another finish. What's this? This is a matte surface. So straight up matte finish. And now we can see that in our cut line, right, when it drops here below the core, we don't get any highlighting on that edge, so you just fade that out. Okay, much like we've been doing in our renderings. Good cast shadow, nice reflected light up in here, nice reflected light below, a little less because the stripe is black here, and also a little less right at the silhouette because of our shadow. So our reflected light is between that area, so it's out a little from the vehicle or the surface, so it's residing right up into this zone. Let's look at it if it was chrome. With chrome, I don't need that fake sun, so let me just turn that off so I'm not getting that doubling up. Okay, so there's the reflection of our sun, and now we're back to that thing that we've been rendering in Photoshop, which is this, straight chrome layer before we reflect. And here's a really nasty reflection. Look at that, right? Because it's reflecting back to this inside and back again, and it's just sort of doubling up on itself. And you notice this side is reflecting into that black hole. That's also what we saw in our studies as well. And my demo is that it is reflecting back inside, so it just goes into darkness, and that gets darker and darker inside, so that just ends up being black there. So this is the same sort of thing you would have on top in Photoshop, and you would just erase it, introducing the Fresnel, and then we could end up getting something like this, straight up glossy. And because of Moto, I've got to turn back on my sun. It's in a slightly wrong position, but at least it shows up. But it's very close. Look at the nice, strong Fresnel effect here at the back. See it almost disappearing, almost becoming its background. Okay, same with the sky. Same with the ground. And then here I put a little bit of a bone line there, a little bit of a form change, so you could see that it was. Let's pull up here so we can see that a bit. So here it's reflecting the sky as it rolls over, but then it starts to see the canopy. So you would just grab everything here in the canopy, flip it upside down, and warp it and float it right on top of that. Okay, just on the back side. You can see where it flattens out. So that's where our line of sight's bouncing into the surface, up into the canopy. That's where we see it there. And when it gets back to here, it's just missing the canopy in that area, and it's back up to the sky. So we have the sky here at the back. Okay. And then if I made this metallic, just by turning up the, let's go back over here, find this material. If I turn up the specular amount, you'll see what happens. Here's the nice little Fresnel right here as well. So right as that radius rolls away, just like the back of the shape, it gets a little bit brighter. And then the front here, a little less, so we see more red on that radius. And in fact here as well, we see more red because it's not as reflective. Let's see what happens if I turn up this specular amount. And let's shift it from white to red. So you can see it's starting, let's pull this back down, maybe 45%. Okay, so it's building right around wherever it reflects the sun. Okay, and this is what we've done last lesson, which was making everything metallic. This is basically all you're doing is going in and bumping up where it reflects the sun. And look, as I turn that shape, look how much shinier this side gets. Okay, and then our Fresnel, where our line of sight is most perpendicular now, is here at the front. Okay, so that is much more transparent, and we see the base paint through there. Okay, and much more like chrome at the back. And if I do that again, I think that's kind of fun to see. I think it's helpful to see this real time. Just got to pause for a second. It's never going to be perfect unless I render it or let it sit for a while. And Modo, if I let it sit, this just gets better and better. But I don't want to spend your time that way. So here we can see very transparent, very opaque around the silhouette. And if I move it and rotate my object, I would expect then this area right here just in front of the vent, which is very reflective right now, if I move our line of sight perpendicular to that, okay, and pull back a bit, then I can start to see through here, okay, it's still reflective, but it's nowhere near as reflective as the silhouette, where my line of sight's more tangent. Like look at the front now. So before up here it was, you know, not shiny at all, and now just super shiny. So it's all dependent on your line of sight. Let's raise up my line of sight, my camera position, and see what happens to the horizon. Here, dead side view, it's almost in the exact same position as it is behind. And watch as I roll up. Okay, here's that horizon. Now look, it's cutting through almost the top position of that vent. If I look at the vent as reference for my low camera angle, my side view, the horizon's through the middle of my vent. Rotate up. Okay, now the horizon is near the top, and the higher I go, right, the more that horizon moves up. Same, wraps all the way around the back, and then here it's actually climbing up the side of that canopy. Okay, because that's where my line of sight bounces down to the ground, so you could easily get that to happen. Let's turn down my spec a little bit. In fact, if I just make it 0 or 1, again, you're going to see we're back to a glossy surface. So that's the difference there between glossy and metallic as well. I already had one here as metallic, but what did that one? 45, yeah. So there's a nice metallic. You get a really nice temperature change with that sky across that, and you can see the contrast, and the form becomes much easier to see because of the increased contrast. So hopefully that makes sense. let's jump over to Photoshop and just take a shiny shape and probably just a cylinder and just review some of the layering techniques, and let's just play around with changing some of the base layers into some different materials, and let's see if we can crack that formula on how to do carbon fiber in an easy way.